Good morning and welcome here to Maranatha. We're in our study of promises in various passages in the Bible here. So as I was thinking about this, and I've mentioned this several times before, in our curriculum that we're given, that we've purchased, they really don't tell you where to take the lesson. They give you the material and you kind of take it where you want to take it or where the discussion takes it. So we've been doing that. It's been working lately, and so we'll continue to do this for this morning. If you have your Bibles or your phone, if your Bible's on your phone, and I have no problem with having my Bible on the phone. I'm not a really good book reader off a tablet and such. I don't know, there's just something for me about turning a page and putting a book down, but younger people can handle it. More power to them, because I don't always have a book with me, but I always seem to have my phone with me. And so I can always, doctor's office or someplace where I unexpectedly have to wait, you can pull your phone up, pull up a Bible passage or a book you're reading, and there it is. So I have no problem with that. So we would be in 2 Samuel, and we should know now the difference or distinguishing characteristics between the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Let's just do, what is the difference between 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles? Bob.
The Northern Kingdom.
The Northern Kingdom.
One, it's not mentioned in Chronicles.
It's not mentioned in Chronicles. That's one distinguishing characteristic. Because if you read through your Bible in the year, you have the year plan, and you just go start in Genesis, work your way to Revelation, you're going to start reading 1st and 2nd Kings. You're going to say, the king here, the king there, the king after that king was this king. And you turn the 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and it starts out king here, king here. And it seems like they're talking about the same stuff, but they're not. The Northern Kingdom is not mentioned in the book of 1st and 2nd Chronicles. None of those kings. Why are none of those kings mentioned? Couple reasons. How many of them were good? None. How many are from the line of Jesse? None. And so the promise that we're going to look at today is made to David and to his lineage, that there's going to be a what on the throne? A king. Okay? That's all, whoever authored 1st and 2nd Chronicles, that's all they're concerned about, is this lineage coming through David to getting to ultimately to who? Christ. All right? That's all he's interested in. And he starts in 1 Chronicles chapter 1, he starts with Adam and works his way through, but he only has so many pages to write all this down, so he skips a lot of material and he just focuses on David, the tribe of Judah, and goes from there. So we're going to be taking a look at how David was anointed or promised this, and we've been looking at these covenants. And what would be another word for covenant? Okay, promise. So, what's the benefit of a promise? Why, if there's no benefit, why make it?
You're assuring somebody that something is going to happen.
Okay, you're assuring somebody that something's going to happen. What does assuring do to somebody?
Gives them peace.
Okay.
Gives them confidence.
Okay. Assurance gives people peace and gives them confidence. All right? For example, if I were fixing something, which you know is a miracle, just starting right there, and I called up one of you guys, or went on YouTube, which is normally what I do, and the person on the video said, now listen, I assure you, if you do this, this is going to happen, and this is going to pop out, take it out, put the new one back in. I assure you that's going to happen. as opposed to, hey, buddy, now I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I'm telling you, this is what I would try first. I would try do this, and if it breaks, oh, well, it's broke anyways. All right, so what one would I rather have?
You would obviously rather be listening to the one that is being presented with confidence.
Presented with confidence, because I'm more likely to what? Succeed, or even before, pardon me?
Believe them, I guess.
I'm more-
Making the video, do you have much faith do you have?
I'm more likely to at least do what? Or can be entertained. I'm at least more apt to do what? Attempt it.
Yes.
All right? If I'm not sure something's going to happen, I'm going to take a risk. If I'm going to attempt it at all. And eventually, I'm going to weigh the pros and the cons, am I not? Of that risk. Is it worth it to risk this? Yes or no? And if it's not, I'm not going to what? I'm not going to do it. All right, so if God has made me promises, what do you think he's trying to do to me? Reassure you. Did I do what? That I should do what? That I should do what he says. He's trying to reassure me that I should do what he says. All right, so we have a bunch of we've been looking at covenants for 6 weeks now, 7 weeks, whatever we've been in this section here. What promises have I learned? Not necessarily to deal with me, but God has made to people. So, what happened in the Garden of Eden after the fall? Is there a promise there?
Or judgment.
There's judgment, but in the midst of that judgment, there's a promise.
This is going to be, there were three, and this and this and this, these things, this is what's going to happen to you, this is what's going to happen to you, and this is what's going to happen to you.
Okay, so what ultimately was going to happen to Satan?
The snake was going to have to slither and have like dust in his mouth.
Okay,
And the woman was going to, what was it, bruise his head or something?
yeah, the snake was going to bite the heel, but the seed of the woman was going to bruise his head.
Yes,
Okay, that happened.
yes,
When did that happen?
Christ.
With Christ. Next promise. Rolodex in your brain, Genesis 3, keep 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Are you going to Abraham from here?
Well, there's a stop before Abraham. Noah.
Oh, yeah.
What's the promise there?
That God would not judge the earth by water again.
What part of the earth?
The whole earth.
The whole earth. All right? And that he would set a what in the sky to? A rainbow. Okay, has God destroyed the whole earth with a flood since then? No. Next promise. Now, Bob. Abraham. What was the promise there?
Promise of land.
Promise of land. Okay.
Promise of a great nation.
Great nation.
The world would be blessed.
The world will be blessed. How has the world been blessed through Abraham? Because if you look at our world now, Jews don't seem to be the blessing to anybody, the way they were persecuted. So what was the blessing if they're treated like that by the majority of the world? Christ. Right? Blessed. So far, God's keeping all his promises. Now, let's move on to the next one. The next one after Abraham would be Moses. Okay, the Mosaic covenant. And we could split hairs. Some people may say there's another one in between there, but we'll just jump to Moses. What was the promise there? I'll be your God if.
It was conditional.
It was a conditional. If you listen to me, I will be your God. You'll stay safely in the land. How'd that work out? Didn't work out. Didn't listen. And how long did it take for Israel to prove they weren't going to listen?
Probably not very long, but he waited a while.
Yeah, he waited. He was long suffering. Okay? But eventually he did what?
Kind of fall off into captivity.
He did what he said. He said, I'm telling you what's going to happen. If you do this, another people group is coming in and they're going to take you, they're going to destroy everything, then they're going to take you out of the land. But I'm telling you, it's for your good, but I'm bringing you back. Now, all these promises except for the Noahic have taken a bunch of what? Did it happen immediately? It took a lot of time. All right? What happens to the average human being with a promise in time? Or not only forgotten, or what happens to your trust in the promise, your confidence in the promise? You lose that confidence. So did somebody in the New Testament have to address that issue? Did Peter have to address that issue? Where is his coming? That's what people were saying in Peter's day, Paul's day, which is about 30 to 50 years after who? After Jesus came. So 30 to 50 years, Jesus before he left said what? I'm coming back. 50 years later, people are wondering what? Where's he at? He said he's coming back. Where's he at? And they were staggering at that promise because it had taken so long. So if they were staggering at 50 years, what about 2,050 years? And so the statement has to be made, what's time to God? Yeah, what's one day? 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. 1 year is 1,000 years, 1,000 years, 1 day. In other words, it's what to him? It's nothing. To us, it's what? Yeah, to us it's long, but what's time to us? Everything. Because we perceive that's all we what? It's all we have is time. It's all we have. And we know that it's what? It's limited. So we want our promises when? Now. Because I can't perceive unlimited time because I'm not in that realm. So we get anxious about the promises. But God says you shouldn't be that way. If I make a promise, you should be confident in it. I'm going to do it. No matter the passing of how much time, I'm going to make sure it happens. So is Christ coming back? Yes, he is. Do we know when? No. But should we lose confidence in it? No, we shouldn't. Those are some general promises, but what are some promises God's made to you? Because we're going to continue to look at that this morning in our morning message. We don't necessarily have to come up with a list, but I think we need to. He'll be there with you. We need to think about some of these promises that God has made to you. Because we've all received the same precious promises. Paul, whatever promise Paul received, you received. Whatever promise Peter received, you received. Now, and I'll clarify this again in the morning message, the promises we've all received, that has nothing to do with our vocation, what our calling is. Our callings are different, are they not? And our spiritual giftedness is different. Is it not? Yes. But the general spiritual promises of never leaving nor forsaking, of being conformed into the image of God, is no different for anybody. You have received the same faith that Peter, Paul, John, whoever else, Jim Elliott, whoever you want to think about, you've received that same faith. That's God's what to you? What's that God's what to you? His promise. So is anybody born again with a spiritual defect? You know, some kids are born with holes in their hearts. Some kids are born with 3 chambers instead of 4 chambers. Some kids are born with the vessels that should be going from the heart to the lung reversed. Those are called congenital birth defects of the heart. Is anybody born again with congenital birth defects? No. No, none of us are. We're all given the same shot. So these promises are we're to bank on them and to make us confident that what God said he's going to do, he's going to do it. All right. So that's our little introduction into 2 Samuel 7. So we're just continuing these promises that God has made to people, and the same God that keeps those promises back then will keep them now. All right, so 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 8 and 9, it says, "Now therefore, as thou shalt say unto my servant David," so Nathaniel, I think, that is speaking here, "Thus saith the Lord of hosts." So what's the Lord of hosts mean? This is just a little extra. He's sometimes called this.
I think of the Lord of heaven, earth,
Okay, what's the host?
angelic.
Okay. Thus saith the Lord of whatever is in heaven, all those spiritual beings, he's the Lord of it. Okay? So, if I'm going to anoint a king is over a what? A kingdom. It ought to be done by the one who's over it all. See what I'm saying? If I'm going to anoint a king under heaven, which would be on the earth, it should be done by somebody who's over it all. And the Lord of hosts is God, who's over it all, everything on the earth and everything above the earth. He's over it all. Because sometimes, has this ever happened? It may or may not. Somebody at work came to you and told you to do something or promised you something, and they were in no position to make that promise. They were out of their lane. You ever had that happen? Yeah, go over there and do that, blah, blah, blah. Well, who said? I said you could do. And to come to find out, they had no right to say that because they weren't over that. So God can't be making a promise to somebody if he's not over that. He had no right to make that promise. He's telling us, I have the right to tell you this. Okay? I took thee from where? David. 2 Samuel 7, verse 8, I took you from... What's that? Tending the sheep. Okay? From following the sheep to be ruler over my people Israel. What kind of a leap is that?
That's a big one.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Because who would be out tending the sheep in a family? Yeah, the youngest. In Jesus' day, the shepherds are all tending the sheep by night, as the song goes. those guys couldn't even go to court to be a witness because they weren't considered a full human being. Okay? So that's quite a jump. And I was with thee whithersoever thou wentest, and have cut off all thy enemies out of thy sight, and have made thee a great name, like unto the name of the great men that are in the earth. I have made thee a what? At the end of verse 9, I have made thee a great name. What's that sound like? Past, present, or future?
Made would be present.
Okay. He's telling David what he's already done with him. And David's still at this point in time a what? He was a shepherd. God made him this way. Okay? That's a promise. So that's my point in bringing up promises. It doesn't matter where you start when you come to Christ, does it? It doesn't matter where you start. You can start at the lowliest point in humanity. When God's done with you, hopefully you're going to be where he wants you to be. So he takes this David, who was a shepherd, lowest of the low, makes them these promises. Then look down at verse number 10. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own and move no more. Neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more as before time. And as since the time that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thy enemies, also the Lord telleth thee that he will make thee a house. All right. You want to dive into the weeds on this one? Or do you want to just do surface stuff? Good, we'll dive into the weeds. When I read this passage, moreover, I will appoint thee a place for my people Israel, and will plant them that they may dwell in that place of their own and move how? Or what? Okay. From before Christ was born until, 1948? Where was Israel?
Scattered, occupied land.
Was it Israel? No. So what do you think happened to the interpretation of these verses?
Probably a place other than the one of God's choosing may have been chosen. Well, it can't be here, it must be here.
Okay, that's a possibility. So normally in reading my Bible, I can interpret it literally or I can interpret it figuratively or allegorically. So what do you think happened before Christ to 1948 when someone I'm preaching this passage in 1700s, there didn't know Israel. So what might be a possibility, a persuasion to interpret this metaphorically? Can you see how you would be tempted to do that? Because is literal Israel there? It's not there. All right? So if it's not there, and I'm reading this passage that says they'll move no more, then I have to flip over and call it figurative, because I can't stand, and there's a possibility I wouldn't stand in front of people and say they've moved no more, when they can look at a map and say, well, they're not there now. Okay? So this is how some interpretation some people have, and it depends on how far you want to go take it. Some have taken it so far that who has replaced Israel? The church. All right? So because they at certain times read these passages and Israel wasn't in existence, some came to the conclusion that God was done with Israel, and now the church has taken Israel's position, and now this stuff is figurative language. And there's more to it than that, but this would be a passage somebody would look at and point and say, see, this is how this happened.
During that period of time, what percentage of the population of that area would have been Jewish?
I have no idea.
Somebody probably did a study somewhere. I'm sure our government paid for it. I just wondered if anybody's ever read that. Is it, in the 1920s or, 1850s, was that area of Judea, was it 50% Jewish population or
That's
60 or 20 or?
that'd be a good question to look up, because millions poured into the actual land after it became a country, or really after World War II.
Yes.
Somebody said, we need to get our own land and we need to stick together so that this will never, ever, ever, ever happen again.
I feel like there had to be a decent percentage. I don't know. I just wouldn't think it would be 5%.
I'd like to know how many Jewish people live in Israel today. What of all the Jewish people in the world, which would be hard to find because some of them have lost their lineage, how many of all in the world actually live in Israel? But irregardless of that land now, in the future, at the end times, it's going to be there. Israel's going to be there. It's going to be a spot on this earth, and it's going to be there forever and ever and ever. And that's what we can count on. All right. So what's the other promise? They're going to be in this land. And any other promises God makes? Okay. So is that stopped yet? Nope. So there's got to be coming a day where this is going to be reality. That there isn't going to be any more of this affliction. What's another one? He's going to make them a house. All right. Now, David wanted to build God a house, but God said, I'm going to build you a house. And so that's that promise. All right. 2 Samuel 7:12 and 16. And when the days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which will proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. All right, let's stop there for a second. Why do you think God said it this way? After you die, I'm going to set up thy seed after thee, which will proceed out of thy bowels. Why do you think he's added that little phrase in there, in this promise? Can you think of a previous promise where there had to be clarification?
Abraham?
Yeah. Because God made a promise to Abraham that the person that came out of his seed would be the one inheriting this. It'd be from him. And they got into a little point of unbelief because, again, the passage of time happened. And so Sarah said, it must not be me. It must be Hagar. So go in there and do that. And God's like, no, it's you and Abraham. They're going to have this. David, it's your seed. It's coming from you. All right? So he's making sure they understand that. And I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom for how long? Forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. Isn't that interesting how he says that? So who is going to inflict the punishment on his offspring if they don't listen? Yeah, but who's he going to use?
The rod of men.
The rod of men. What's that mean and what's that look like?
He's not classifying any particular people group, but obviously he's going to use, I think, an army from another country. Rod is, I don't know if I want to use the word weapon, but a form of punishment.
Okay? It's an instrument.
Yes.
It's a tool. Okay? So how's that work?
Well, I think a view of it here would be Babylon.
Okay? So how does the rod of men work in correction? So what are these Israelites, what's their problem? What's their deal?
I mean, for one, it would be, they're worshiping other gods,
Okay, they're worshiping other gods.
which at a basis would be not following God's commandments.
Not following God's commandments. So what kind of lifestyles are they living? Ungodly. Okay? So I'm living ungodly lifestyles. So when I get taken captive, what happens to my lifestyle?
Well, that's a change.
That's going to what? It's going to change. What's going to happen to my lifestyle now? In captivity. Change to whatever the captives want it to be. Irregardless of how you what? How you feel. Right? I'm going to change that. No matter what you think, you're going to have no what?
No say.
No say in it at all. All right? So, is God trying to tell me, I'm trying to think of a proper application. Is God trying to tell me somebody ultimately controls your life? Does something ultimately control your life? Does some...
I think ultimately you have free will, but
Yeah.
obviously God can make your life, if you're, in this case, they're not doing his will, they're not following his commandments, he is making their life miserable. But that doesn't mean you're necessarily still going to bend to his ways.
No, and that's why he has to make the new covenant. In Jeremiah 31, he tells us. But I'm finding out that either I can, because God promised if you follow me, this is how life's going to go. And life's going to go be a blessing. If you don't follow me, someone else is going to come in and call the shots. And life isn't going to be real good. So now, these people who get shipped off to Babylon, they get to what? What do they get to do?
Whatever the Babylonians want them to do.
Yeah, so they get to compare. Here's life under God. Here's life under captivity. Do you think there was a difference? Yeah. So, I want you to come back and I want you to choose what? Life under God. Because life under God is better than life this way. Is it possible that many human beings think they know what is ultimately, and I agree we have free will, best for their lives? And does that always work out, or does it ever work out?
Most of the time, that's not gonna work out very well, but I don't know that most people put that much thought into it.
No, yeah.
I
Well,
think they do whatever they feel like doing at the moment, and the thought of long-term consequences perhaps, or long-term planning isn't really.
so when do they start to think about that? Or when something goes wrong. Then all of a sudden, I'm interested in God. When,
All too often, it's how did God let this happen?
how did God let this happen?
Do this to me.
Yes. And so God still uses life, still uses people to get people's attention and to show them that life under Him is much, much better than life following somebody else or life on your own. And sometimes He uses people to correct that. So in America, where are we headed? Life away from God. All right? A life away from God. So I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I think we can all see, and I think we can all sense that something dramatic in the next several years is going to happen.
What did the Amishmen say?
Oh, feeding at the pig's trough?
Yeah, that's stuck, that kind of sticks with you a little bit.
Yeah, well, the other thing that's going to stick too, I'm going to mention that this morning that I shared. So, we all sense something's happening, right? And we all sense that it's not just going to be rhetoric in the future. There's something going to physically happen. Do you know in Russia there's a moral code? Do you know why and maybe it's because they don't publicize it like we do in America, everything. The riots and stuff, do you read about riots and such in Russia or China? Do you know why you don't read about it?
You know, the only uprising I remember in China was at Tiananmen Square back in, what, the 80s?
Yeah. And what happened?
It was brutally crushed.
It's brutally crushed.
The image of a tank running over that kid standing in front of it was all over the world.
Yeah. So it's the rod of men keeping them what?
In line.
Keeping them in line. And that's, in Russia, there's a moral code. They're not doing it because they want to. They're doing it because they have to. But it's keeping them in line. So if another country, and I don't think necessarily this is going to happen, but it could happen, invades, and all these Americans who want to do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it, if somebody else comes in and takes over, guess what's not going to happen? That's not going to happen. And so I think the point being, either I can choose to follow and understand that life under God is better, or I can learn the hard way that it is. And so God's going to send these people into captivity to learn, listen, there's nothing better than life under God. And so they need to choose that. All right, anything else from this lesson? So what is the purpose of a promise?
To give someone assurance.
To give someone assurance. Assurance that these things are going to happen, that you can count on it. And so if I know it's going to happen, then I should be able to do what?
Prepare for it.
prepare for it or go out and do whatever God's told me to do. Because he's made a promise. Right? If I go up to my kids and tell them, listen, I promise you, I'm trying to do what? Trying to reassure them? Trying to tell them to go on what? To go do it. All right. Any other questions or comments? So is this covenant to David, this promise to David, a conditional or non-conditional covenant? And what's the key to tell the difference? What's the key words in a conditional covenant? 2 words. If and then. If I see if and then it's conditional. If I don't see that, I'm only going to see God say something promising me, and if he has no expectations of me, then it's unconditional. God's going to do it, right? So when God made the promise with Abraham, remember Abraham was in a dream and there was animals cut in half, and who walked down the middle of it? But who walked down the middle? Abraham and God, or God? Remember that? Was Abraham in the trance and God walked through the middle of that? Do you know why? Do you know the purpose for splitting the animals in half? Do you know where that comes from? In ancient Near East, if I was going to make a covenant with the king down the road, we would split those animals in half and say, hey, buddy, I'm going to protect you. You're going to protect me. I'm going to give you 4,000 trees. You're going to give me 1 pot of gold. That's the deal. Cut the cows in half, walk down the middle. What I'm saying is, if I break my end of the deal, you treat me like these animals. You cut me in half, which means you do what? You kill me. Okay? When God makes the covenant with Abraham, Abraham's in a trance. Who walks down the middle? God does. So God's not saying, Abraham, you're part of this deal. God's saying, hey, listen, if I don't fulfill this, then you treat me like these animals. So God's making a pretty bold what? Making a pretty bold promise. And that's the confidence, the assurance that you and I need to have when we read these promises that God has made, that he's going to do it. All right. Let's close with a word of prayer. Larry, could you close our time with a word of prayer?
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your love and for us, for your word that we can see in the midst that we can rely on you and the promises that you made to us. Help us, Lord, to look at our lives and see where anything needs to be changed, and that is what we learned this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.